Um, I think the important thing is that we should obey the law. And the second point is we should find a formula that treats the same condition which is legally allowed. Remember, in Kampo, we're treating the person. We're not necessarily repeating formulas. So the important thing is to understand the patient and find a formula that does the same thing. Fuzu is also not permitted in the UK. So what we do is we go to the stage of the disease, and inside, for example, of the end stage, there's many formulas which do not contain Fuzu. So we will select one of those. We have to teach those formulas because they're part of the disease pattern. For example, if you can't use a formula, it doesn't mean the disease doesn't exist. So we still have to teach the formulas so you know what to expect when you use an alternative formula. The complete program, the unique attribute of the Kampo program is that in every session you treat patients in a clinical setting. So the Kampo program immerses the student in tactile knowledge of the patient. So the complete overview is you will have 50% of your learning will be examining patients, reviewing how the patients did, bringing your own patients, everything related to clinic. And for the first module, you will learn the basic vocabulary of Kampo. During that time, you will also learn a selection of useful formulas and useful diseases. Thing we don't know is how diligently you're going to study. I can come and do you a lecture. Usually there are, say, 40 days. But if you don't study yourself, then things will be very slow. If you are going to study, and when I come back you know what I'm talking about, we can move ahead rather quickly. So part of the question for me is, are you going to sincerely study? If you are, then the things will move ahead quite quickly. I have a question about children, and that is yes. Children's formulas can begin at birth. Many of the formulas for children are growth formulas. They try to help the child grow out of diseases. Also, a special problem with children is that they can't speak. So it's difficult to know exactly what's happening with children. In that case, the abdominal exam is very useful. The abdominal exam is supposed to have begun with children. It's in the 1980s, the main use of Kampo was keeping adult people free from viruses and able to work. After that, Kampo began to be used extensively on children and complications of children's growth patterns. Um, Recently, Kampo has moved into the area of helping regain mobility and cognitive awareness in the elderly. So, in every decade, a new kind of challenge comes up for Kampo. The abdominal exam is mainly used in adults to distinguish between kyo and jitsu. So it tells you if the person is full or empty. In children, the abdominal exam is very useful for that. The other way of diagnosis is to match the symptoms against the three substances or the six divisions. That's the kind of thing that you need a teacher to explain. So Kampo is a mixture of things that you need to be intelligent and interested in understanding, plus the things that you understand through tactile touching, plus your intuition or your sort of back knowledge that perhaps you have in understanding your patients. I think the main is to learn as much as possible. If you know TCM herbs, that's good. If you know nursing, that's good. If you know midwifery, that's good. The more you know, the better. But if you come to Kampo without knowing TCM herbs, you can still use Kampo effectively. Well, single herbs is a challenge because the herbs behave differently when they're together than they do when they're singular. So every time you write a new formula, which you created with single herbs, you've created an unknown quantity. Also, the patient is an unknown quantity, and the disease is an unknown quantity. So you have three unknown quantities in most clinical encounters. If the formula is a known quantity, that gets rid of one unknown. So you can act with more surety if the formula is already known. Is that simple? Um, I ask you a question. Does the group value clinical demonstrations on how to diagnose and treat, or do you think you don't need that? Remember, you can see me, but I can't see you. I don't know what you're thinking. The more clinical, the better. Now, in many classes in England, there is no clinical demonstration. Um, the clinical is read from a book, like a novel. Moreover, when the patient comes the second time, there's feedback. You get to know how the formula performed. First of all, the patient comes in and you say, I understand this. It's a problem with water toxins. And you treat them for water toxins. And they come back and they didn't get better. What do you say? What do you say? You say, I misunderstood something. Because the formula is known. You know what the formula does. If the formula doesn't work, it's a misdiagnosis. You have to be able to understand when you get the diagnosis right and when you get the diagnosis wrong. You must continually correct yourself and make the formula more fitting to the patient. If you think it's a cheese stagnation and they come back and they're not any better, you have to consider you got it wrong. This is the difficulty, is to recognize in the patient just what you can treat and how effective you can be. Okay, I can answer that to Idan. Yes, the basic language in Kampo is the part of the first module. So in the first module, we study the show, then we study 2, 3, or 4 formulas, and then we see some patients. So yes. And you will learn what yin and yang mean, what is inside and outside, and then you will study bronchitis. In the first lesson, you will study influenza. Then you will study yin and yang, full and empty, inside and outside. Then you will study bronchitis. Then you will study bronchial asthma. Then you will study 3 useful shows. And then you will study the theory of 3 substances, how to tell chi, blood, and body fluids. I've been to a seminar based on Canada that included body types and diagnosis language. Will we cover that? Body type is very important when, okay, I'll tell you. Yes, it's a crucial type, and you do have to know that. But the first question to answer, do you know about the, well, let's not get too complicated. The first question is the illness acute or chronic? If chronic, study the body type, or we'll call them evolutions of yin and yang. So you don't always use the body type, but it's an important aspect of treating an ongoing disease. But for a new disease that's progressing rapidly, the body type is less important than the disease state. If the illness is progressing rapidly, you must act quickly. Okay, so it's good to have some formula. Yes, it's good to have some formulas in your clinic if you're treating acute illnesses. And on language referring to body type, delicacy, excess texture of the skin. I think, okay, you done his writing? I'll just wait. Deficiency. Was this a kind of, I meant, yeah, okay. Was this a kind of, it sounds like with the delicacy that you're talking about some kind of, what's that thing they do with the shallow needles? Deficient. It seems to mean kyo. Do you know kyo and jitsu? Uh-huh. So, constitution. If you say someone is deficient, are you saying they're... This is an important question. Kyo is a complex term. It is a diagnosis, not an observation. Then, if kyo, the question is, where is the kyo? For example, many people think that all influenza begins with the Tai Yang, but that might not be so. So in the first seminar, we're going to look at people who have influenza who don't have Tai Yang. So those kind of things are important. Well, in the early days of learning TCM in London, some teachers taught that influenza equals Tai Yang. Of course, in Kampo, this is not so. Well, I'd like to know really what sort of specialities the group of people have, and what sort of things they would most like to study or to improve. I'm interested in assisting your practice. So tell me more about yourselves so I can add more into the lectures that are suited to you. Digestion, very good. We're very good with digestion. Kampo is strong on digestion. Oncology, what do you mean by oncology? Tell me more. Treating cancer patients. Ah, okay. This is one thing that Ophir has probably told you. There's so much research in Japan on assisting cancer patients. You know, according to the laws in most countries, complementary therapy is not allowed to treat cancer as a specialty disease. Our role is supporting and supplementing people who are undergoing other treatments. There's so much written about this in Japan. Yes, you will find in most countries Western medicine has closed the it's not really market, but the seminars stand by themselves, meaning digestion seminars will cover it, or will every seminar connect to one another? Okay. After you learn the diagnosis, then you're simply looking at different ways to apply what you've learned. But the most important thing is the clinical. Remember, every day you're going to look at and examine lots of patients. All of the diagnosis can't be covered in the first seminar. And every patient we see is going to present a different challenge of some kind. So there's no way to guarantee in advance what we're going to learn. For example, if we study bronchitis and a cancer patient comes in, we have to go back and talk about that patient. We can't screen the patients and say, oh, no difficult patients today, we're just beginners. We have to study every patient who comes in. So the diagnosis will be steady and constant, and you will have a certain kind of controlled environment at what I teach you. But every clinic is a new challenge. There's going to be patients who don't understand what's wrong with them, patients who have many complaints, and it's difficult to find one treatment level. You're going to have patients of all kinds, and this is really the challenge, is to keep up with the patients and to have you understand on some level the complexity of all the things you do in clinic. So the morning is very controlled. You will learn everything. I'll be with you there. But when the patients begin to roll in, then some, what could you call it? Snowstorm comes into the room. And we have to work together to understand what the patients mean and how to benefit each of them in some way. So there's some things that we can control, but of course the patients we can't control. Did you get that? So tell me more about yourselves. Are most people acupuncturists, and do you have special interest? Okay. Yes, I see everyone's going to tell me something. Good, good. I am acupuncturist, mostly acupuncturist. Yes, I am. I'm all acupuncture. I want to change it. Oh, yes, good. Yes, I am. Practice and Chinese herbs. Acupuncture herbs and nutrition. Aha. I'm Western herbs and Chinese herbs and acupuncture too. Okay, so let me ask you a question. What do you do about the restrictions on licorice? I've been told it's 1/4 gram per day. Okay, thank you. I use mostly tincture. I use the permitted dose, 5 milliliters per week. Oh, fear is typing. I gave it and got to the limit. I just lowered the dosage. Okay, another question is, how prevalent is licorice in the local diet? For example, in Germany, it's used in many cakes and cookies. In the Middle East, it's used in sweets. So, do you think your patients are already eating it? Oh, Michael's going to tell me something. And Ophir's going to tell me something. Of course, of course. Oh, everybody's going to tell me a lot. Of course. Okay, good. So, in fact, possibly people are already eating it. In that case, it's not much of a problem to have to give them less because they're already having it. Not as a single ingredient. Desserts, cookies, cakes, pies. It's even in some kind of drink flavorings. Beverages.
Okay, Gretchen. Thank you a lot. I think this is quite enough, and
Okay.
I think we will finish here. And thank you for having you here in the webinar. I think someone want to write
I see
something.
somebody writing.
Oh,
Yes,
thank you.
everybody seems to. Those names I recognize. I recognize your questions. I know some of you already, slightly briefly already.
It will be great to see you in November and learn the first seminar, the first one from the complete program.
Right. And obviously, if you have patients that you would like us to look at, please bring them. Because as we said, we can control the lessons, but the patients are like a tornado or an open window. Anything can come in, and we have to be able to understand how to treat whatever they present. So please bring your patients.
Yeah,
Make a list of your patients
make a
and
list.
tell us when you bring a patient. Tell us what you've tried. Tell us what how it worked. Tell us what you're hoping to do. Anything that is useful to make your own clinic better. That's the purpose of studying a class, to make your practice better.
Great, thank you, Gretchen, and thank you all for being here in that hour. And we will see you on November.
I'm looking forward to it, and thanks
Me
for
too.
coming to the webinar.
Good night.
Good night.